Thank you, Rev. Everybody, it's such an honor to be with you. And I got to tell you, this is one of the organizations that makes a difference in this country. And this is a moment where the National Action Network needs to be front and center in the efforts for change in this country, because it's a moment that's ripe for change. We are dealing with huge challenges, but it's a moment filled with possibility at the same time. Now, the good news is what Reverend Sharpton has created with all of you. And there is a brilliance in this I want to acknowledge, because I think it's underestimated. Rev and I have talked about what it means to really organize people for change. It means building at the grassroots. Change comes from the bottom up, not from the top down. It means creating lots of energetic leaders in every part of this nation. It does not mean keeping all the power and control in some headquarters. It means spreading leadership and developing leadership, and this room is witness to that. It means, and this is one of the areas I give Rev particular credit, it means truly supporting and fostering youth leadership, not holding it back, fostering it, strengthening it every single time. Rev, he started rather young in the movement. How old were you when you were first preaching and involved in the movement? 4 when he started preaching. I'll go 4, of course. Most of us start our vocations at 4. 13 when he first joined the movement. So the part of why he honors our youth leaders is because he was one. He understands the power. So Rev, as these gatherings occur, I sometimes try and step back a little bit, see what's actually been built and what's grown. You planted a seed years ago of understanding what this could be, and you very wisely, you did not call it the national political or the national issue or whatever. You called it the Action Network. Now is the time more than ever we need the Action Network, because we've got to take action on so many issues. You created it, and let's say thank you to Reverend Sharpton for having had that foresight. And I want to talk about this moment we're facing. I'll be very quick, but I got a couple of things I want to tell you that I hope will give you a little more energy, a little more wind in your sails for the fights ahead that we have to win together. I first want to thank the leaders are here, so many great people, but I want to single out, of course, Reverend Richardson for his tremendous leadership. I thank you. I know you're going to hear from Bishop Moore in a second. I'm just a warm-up act, but Bishop Moore, thank you. And the honorees, I want to thank Reverend Lacey, Bishop Swan, and Bishop Sapp for their tremendous leadership. And we are blessed today to be honoring a man who really understood what it was to empower communities, Reverend William Jones. And he also left us with a great leader of the next generation, Jennifer Jones Austin. And she was a co-chair of my transition when I became mayor and helped us build this extraordinary administration I'm blessed to lead. And I'll tell you something, Rev speaks about Reverend Jones and the influence he had on Rev's development, and the sense, I would put it in my own words, the audacity that ran through everything he did. So when you're honoring him today, I want you please to remember that the change agents don't try and be comfortable, and they don't try and make other people comfortable. They try and create the energy, the movement, the sense of challenge, because they don't accept the status quo. And Reverend Jones never accepted the status quo. He also understood you have to fight fire with fire when it comes to organizing people, and you can't be mild in the pursuit of justice that has been denied. So he had a simple line, a quote that makes so much sense here, where the trumpet is expected, the flute will not suffice. Doesn't that say it all? And we know that we need a lot of trumpets right now. So look, what's happening in our country, I don't need to preach to the converted. What's happening in our country is an attempt to deny the many things we already know and the many things we have lived and seen with our own eyes. We spent a couple of years in this country where our national identity crisis has played out. And America for 400 years has been trying to sort itself out, at times reaching toward its better ideals, at times running away from those ideals. In the last couple of years, a lot of this came out in the open. We, before November 8th, were talking more honestly than ever about income inequality. We were talking about mass incarceration. We were talking about the challenge of healing the wounds between police and community and overcoming the injustices of the past. November 8th didn't change that. November 8th was not expected, nor was it a mandate for President Trump. If ever a president didn't have a mandate, it's Donald Trump. And we need to remember that. But all those things that were moving in the year or two before the election, they're out there continuing to move, and we all have to keep moving them. All the movements that were deepening, raising the minimum wage and creating paid sick leave for working people and reducing mass incarceration and changing what we need our police to do to serve our communities better. All of that was happening, is happening, hasn't stopped happening in cities and states all over this country. Most of what happens that affects all of our lives doesn't happen in Washington, D.C. And what I love about NAN is you can reach every corner of this nation. And you need to more than ever, because we not only need to fight back against the things that are happening in Washington, we have to provide the antidote, the counter model every single day where we all live. Every day. Now, because that has been happening, we see some very promising signs. Because people didn't stop fighting, they didn't just fall back in defeat, they picked themselves up, went right back to the front lines, we see progress all over the country, and now it's starting to infect the dialogue in Washington. Those extraordinary protests on January 21st, those changed the reality of our country. Those town hall meetings where people decided to stand up for Obamacare, that changed the trajectory of our country. And by the way, for the second time, the effort to repeal Obamacare has failed. But that's not because of Washington insiders. That's because of what's happening on the ground, that there's so much heat, there's so much energy, there's so many people saying you cannot take my health insurance away, you can't leave my family without the care they need. By the way, a lot of those people, I wish they had done their research maybe a little bit more carefully. A lot of those people voted for Donald Trump and now saying, wait a minute, you're going to take away my health insurance? I'm like, did you read what the guy said? Maybe you would have known that. But, but that's okay. That's okay. We believe in redemption, don't we? So if someone made that choice and then came to realize in the weeks after that they had been bamboozled, and now they're fighting shoulder to shoulder with us to protect President Obama's #1 achievement, we say welcome. Now, let me talk to you for a second about what we're doing right here, because I think it's so important, this whole discussion. The National Action Network all over this nation, when there were instances of injustice, stood up and intervened. I've been with Rev many a time where he got that phone call that a family needed him in another part of the country, and I've never seen him say anything but, I'll be right there. And I admire that. What I could also tell you from real conversations over years with Rev is he would love to never get that phone call. There's some things we do where we wish that the work we're doing could be put out of business. And here's one example. But there's a way to do that. There really is. And it's changing how we police. It's changing how we assume a safe society is created. For too many years, the notion of policing in this country was a quasi-military vision, going into a community and pacifying or securing a community rather than saying, wait a minute, here's a community of people who need what every other human being needs. They need safety and security. How do we do that together? How do we respect the good people of a community and help them to have the lives they deserve? That's what the question should have been, and no one in this room has the illusion that that's the way it was constructed. But guess what? When you turn the tables and you start to do it the right way, it works. 5 years ago, I think it was basically, Rev gathered people from all over this city in a silent march down Fifth Avenue. It was patterned after the extraordinary march almost a century ago by the NAACP that started to create the modern civil rights movement. And it was against a very broken and unconstitutional policy. The march we had 5 years ago was to stop a broken and unconstitutional use of stop and frisk in the city, because it was alienating police and community from having a relationship. It was taking those who we should value the most, our young people, and particularly our young men of color, were singled out and treated like they were suspects no matter what they were doing. It made it harder to police because police and community could not communicate so long as that policy pervaded. Rev sounded the alarm with so many other leaders. That march was a moment of conscience in this city. I'm blessed to say that after that march, as this conversation developed in our city, people realized we had gone astray, chose me in part to come into this office to fix it. Let me give you a fact you should know. In the last 3 years since I've been in this job, stop and frisk has been reduced 93% in New York City. And crime has been reduced 3 years running, which is the object lesson wherever you come from in this nation. This is the biggest city, a city that's had its share of problems. We've had plenty of challenges with crime over the decade. In the biggest, roughest, toughest city, we found that getting rid of the policies that alienated police from community and community from police actually made us safer. And we're going farther. I just want to tell you this quickly. We're retraining our entire police force. We started over the last 2 years. We're deepening it. The whole police force. Every police officer is being trained in how to de-escalate conflicts rather than let them get out of hand. Look at the police force of New York City today. Look at each graduating class. You see a police force that looks more and more like New York City. The last graduating class had well over 50% people of color. More people from this city than ever before. But here's the other thing. They go into that academy, and the message from day one is meet the community, coordinate with the community, communicate with the community, respect the community. It's a vision of neighborhood policing that actually says a police officer's job is to build human relationships, respectful, positive relationships with the people they serve. That is the pathway to safety. One more thing. This year, we are starting for the entire New York City Police Department, 36,000 officers, implicit bias training. Because we have to be real about the history of this country and the scars it has left. And every one of us gets biases from their social circumstance, from our family. We're not saying we're going to make people perfect. We're going to make people aware. We're going to make our officers aware of the biases that still linger, that must be weeded out so they can do their job. Imagine that. Rev, you understand, not so many years ago in this country, it would have been, and in this city in particular, it would have been impossible to convince the NYPD to do implicit bias training. Now it's happening for every one of our officers. I'll finish just 2 quick points. One, yesterday we started something in Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan. For the first time, our officers went out and patrol yesterday wearing body cameras. This is going to create transparency. This is going to create accountability. This is going to make sure we're not going to be relying on a cell phone camera and a jerky image anymore. Every one of our officers, by the end of 2019, every patrol officer in New York City is going to have a body camera. So there's fairness for everyone, the officers and community alike. And a final point I want to make. One of the things we are achieving as you drive down crime, as you heal the wounds between police and community, guess what? That's another part of ending mass incarceration. Because the core, the foundation of ending mass incarceration is not arresting people to begin with. You can't be incarcerated if you're not arrested and sent to jail. So what we're doing more and more is stopping crime before it even happens, giving our young people better alternatives, changing the relationship between police and community so things can be stopped before they even happen. driving down crime, and that's opened the door for something that's been hoped for 85 years since Rikers Island was created. Now, for the first time in history in New York City, we have a plan to close Rikers Island once and for all. But you know what? In the meantime, and we're very adamant about this plan, and it will be closed, but guess what? We owe something to anyone who's incarcerated in the meantime, to not leave them in a situation where they're going to end up in trouble over and over again. That is the history. Too many people became incarcerated. Unfortunately, it became a cycle because they were not given the chance for redemption. When I took office, the average inmate in Rikers Island was getting less than 1 hour of education and training a day. You're not going to change someone's life and trajectory if you don't give them education and training. Our new policy is every inmate gets 5 hours of education and training every single day. And finally, anyone sentenced to a crime who serves time on Rikers, we have a new policy because we want to turn their lives around. They will come out of Rikers Island and they will be guaranteed a transitional job to get their life back on track. All of these things are happening before our very eyes in New York City. If they can happen here, I'm going to borrow from Frank Sinatra, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. If they can happen here, they can happen anywhere. And we should demand them every place in this country. And the National Action Network is the perfect vehicle to foster these changes in every corner of this nation. Thank you, and God bless you all.